Sanjeev Sanyal, we've seen what's happened with the so-called tussle between the Finance Ministry and the Reserve Bank. Questions post-demonetization have been raised, whether the autonomy of the Reserve Bank as an institution is been eroded by the Narendra Modi government. And I often hear Mr. Modi's supporters saying, look, it's not as if the first time the governor of the RBI has been in conflict with the Finance Ministry. But was there a qualitative difference in what we've seen both with Raghuram Rajan and Urjit Patel compared with the past, where the government, in a sense, was determined to set the agenda for the monetary policy of this country?
I think that's a very unfair interpretation of the sequence of events. As you pointed out, there many governments and many Reserve Bank governors have had frictions. And in fact, this debate between finance ministries or treasuries and central banks is a very common thing all around the world. And so there are continuous debates that continue to this day between these two institutions in other countries and in India. Now, taking into account the institutionalization, let's be very clear. The central bank has been given unprecedented institutional powers under this government. I'll give you some examples. Clearly, one of the mandates of the central bank is to control inflation. It is this government that created a framework called under the Monetary Policy Committee with clear targets of targeting a 4% inflation with a band of 2 to 6%. And it has been a hugely successful experiment in the sense that inflation has not only come down by 500-600 basis points. As we speak, inflation is in fact at 2%. And the problem is now that it may be too low. Similarly, one of the things that the government does, the central bank is supposed to do is to regulate the banking system. And we had a problem with unregulated bank lending going on for several years. It is this government that reined that in, forced, incidentally, under the governors that you just mentioned, with the full backing of the government to actually recognize the NPAs, and a new law, the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, was put in place to allow the cleaning up of the banks, which, as we see, the whole business culture of cronyism that had built up over time using public sector bank money, that is being unwound as we speak. Again, this is institutionalization. Now, of course, the independence of the Reserve Bank does not mean independence from the Republic of India. It is still a part of the government, and we have, therefore, since you've given greater autonomy, you also have to have more accountability. And so for that, as the Reserve Bank Act suggests, the board has been strengthened to ensure that accountability is maintained. That is a perfectly reasonable thing to do. In every other country in the world, the central bank is held accountable in one form or the other. Fed, for example, has to answer to the Congress, and Bank of England is answerable to the Parliament and other institutions of the government. So I don't think this idea that somehow their institutional autonomy is being somehow eroded. Far from it. As I just gave you the examples, this central bank has more powers than any other central bank in independent India's history.